I am again thankful to all news media outlets for letting me use their contents. I greatly appreciate that. I am available 24/7 if they need any assistance. Now go to the headlines. Hi and very warm welcome at Amir Shackle 5858. I am Amir Shackle. Following news headlines have been reported by world major English news channels and news agencies. So please watch it.
Tonight, the group chat bombshell, some of America's top leaders texting candidly and sharing sensitive military strategy with a group that included a top magazine editor. The Secretary of Defense, the Vice President, and more debated military options before the raid on Houthis in Yemen. What the President is saying is lawmakers are outraged, some calling for an investigation, and what the editor-in-chief, who was accidentally included, is telling us now. The legal battles from courtrooms to top law firms, the hearing over whether the Trump administration can deport migrants under the Alien Enemies Act. Laura Jarrett and why it's likely headed to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's barely spring and wildfires are threatening the Carolinas. A state of emergency and evacuation orders underway. Our team in the fire zone. The incredible discovery after a plane goes missing in Alaska. The real-life rodeo on a highway near Houston after steers got loose from their trailer. 23andMe bankrupt, once worth billions. What you need to know if you're concerned about the safety of your data. And our sit-down with baseball superstar Juan Soto, who led the Yankees to the World Series. Why the Mets have 765 million reasons they hope he can do the same for them.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening and welcome. An apparent national security breach that included group text exchanges among top Trump administration officials about U.S. war plans in the Middle East is raising alarm bells tonight. The story broken by the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic magazine, who in an article published today describes how he was accidentally added to a discussion group of the U.S. response to Houthi rebel attacks. Jeffrey Goldberg reporting he received the text by way of the encrypted messaging app Signal that appeared to come from Vice President Vance, along with Secretary of Defense Hegseth and Secretary of State Rubio, among others. The messages the Atlantic reports include precise information about weapons packaging, targeting, and timing. Information the magazine reports appeared to be accurate. Tonight, the National Security Council acknowledging the account appeared to be authentic and that it is trying to learn how an inadvertent number was added to the thread. Andrea Mitchell has much more.
Days before U.S. fighter jets took off from the aircraft carrier Harry S. Truman in the Red Sea for strikes against the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen, a security breach with potentially catastrophic consequences for the U.S. military. Details of the U.S. war plans shared in real time with the Atlantic's editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg by accident on the unclassified commercial messaging app Signal.
I assumed that I was being spoofed or hoaxed or being included in some kind of disinformation campaign because it was simply too improbable to me that they would have such poor operational security as to inadvertently invite the editor of The Atlantic into a national security discussion about the timing of a bombing campaign.
But it was deadly serious.
It is week one on the campaign trail this Monday night. From boasting plans to strengthen Canada's sovereignty in Newfoundland and Labrador,
We will build Canada strong.
to promising affordability in Ontario,
This is a tax cut for the waitress, for the welder.
party leaders are making their pitches across Eastern Canada. Courting Quebec, the complicated task of attracting crucial French-Canadian voters this election, especially for the Bloc. Plus, more deadly Russian airstrikes on Ukraine, even with U.S. attempts at peace talks with the Kremlin. And the end of an era.
I just think it's unfortunate, really.
Hudson's Bay's closing chapter as the former retail giant begins liquidation.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. It is the first full day of the federal election campaign and party leaders are hitting the ground running. Presenting their platforms in different parts of the country, their pitches so far are centered on Trump, taxes, and trade. Elections Canada predicts the 5-week sprint will cost taxpayers $570 million. That's lower than the last election in 2021, but the stakes this time may be higher. As Canadians get set to head to the polls on April 28th, voters are grappling with big questions about the country's future. Our Mackenzie Gray is traveling with the Liberal campaign.
A trip to the airport in Gander, Newfoundland served as a backdrop for Mark Carney to underscore what the Canada-U.S. relationship once was.
President Trump's actions have put that kinship under greater strain today than at any time in our storied history. September 11, 2001.
The Liberal leader lamenting a connection previously built on Canadian generosity personified in Gander after 9/11. We're in Gander. With the skies closed, 38 planes were grounded, stranding thousands of Americans who found warm meals in comfy beds.
Welcome to my home.
In the homes of Gander residents like Beulah Cooper and Diane Davis, who welcomed in complete strangers.
I took 3 ladies over, and one of them teared up. And I asked her if she was okay. She said, yeah, she was tired. So I said, would you like to come to my house for a good night's sleep? And she said, I'd love to. It was only the right thing to do.
The Liberal leader met the pair, whose stories featured in the musical Come From Away, an example of the Canada-U.S. relationship that Carney wants back.
You would expect, given what these people have done and the long history, you would think respect and friendship for Canada. I'm just looking for respect at this point.
Respect that includes Donald Trump not talking like this.
Canada should be our 51st state. If you look at a map, they drew an artificial line right through it.
Positioning Carney as the best person to take on Trump is the central strategy of the Liberal campaign, but he's yet to actually do so.
All right. It's all downhill from here. Happy Monday, everyone. So last night, former President Biden saw Othello on Broadway. Joe was surprised by the cast, saying, I didn't know Obama was in this. With the Democratic Party struggling, Joe Biden has offered to help rebuild the party. Yeah, wasn't it the party he helped destroy? That's like Al-Qaeda offering to rebuild the Twin Towers. Let me repeat that. That's like Al-Qaeda offering to rebuild the Twin Towers. I love you people. Meanwhile, President Trump took away Joe Biden's security clearance. That means Joe no longer has access to the daily briefs, which is too bad since those were the only briefs not covered in I'm going to smooth this plane out. After saying his attacks on Tesla were just a joke, Tim Walz said that Republicans have no sense of humor. I don't know, Tim. Millions of us laughed our asses off on election nights. This picture works. A New York woman fell flat on her face after trying to snatch a MAGA hat off a fellow subway passenger. In her defense, she was already pretty drunk. All right. Disney's Snow White is projected to be the lowest-earning live-action remake in the company's history. It's the worst thing to happen to Disney since someone leaked the Minnie and Tommy Lee sex tape. DoorDash will soon allow customers to pay for food deliveries in several installments. Great news if you've ever dreamed of one day owning a Big Mac. According to one nutritionist, the best way to lose weight is to eat like a baby. Tough part is getting your mom to hold still. Disgusting. The White House is seeking logo and branding sponsorships for this year's Easter egg roll. Word is there will be a flyover from the Goodyear blimp. Too easy. And finally, a UK startup aims to get humans living underwater by 2027, which would be an easy transition for those with blowholes. I feel dirty. All right, the Democrat Party is about to tumble into the abyss of permanent irrelevancy. A recent survey has them polling at only 27%. Hell, Randy Weingarten's sperm count has better numbers.
Tonight, breaking news. The major national security breach. Plans for U.S. strikes in the Middle East inadvertently sent to a reporter through an exclusive group chat with top officials. Incendiary devices found at a Tesla dealership and spreading wildfires, prompting evacuations and a state of emergency. First, that stunning revelation. The reporter who claims he knew top secret details about U.S. military strikes on Houthi rebels in Yemen before the strikes happened, saying he was added to a chat group of top national security officials, reportedly receiving top secret details and highly sensitive discussions. Also, the initial opposition to the plans from Vice President J.D. Vance. Martha Raddatz with new reporting. The FBI now launching a task force to investigate the targeting of Tesla property by vandals, at least 48 incidents nationwide. And now authorities looking into multiple incendiary devices found at a Texas dealership today. Severe weather hits the east as tornadoes slam the south. A state of emergency and mandatory evacuations declared along parts of the East Coast. The extremely dry conditions fueling wildfires from the Carolinas to New Jersey. The tragic death of the son of a former New York Yankees star. The statement from one-time World Series champ Brett Gardner on the loss of his 14-year-old son while the family was on vacation in Costa Rica. A former University of Michigan coach appears in court pleading not guilty, accused of gaining access to personal information and medical data of thousands of student athletes. And tonight, the new lawsuit. And we celebrate 45 years of our friends at Nightline, from their beginning during the Iran hostage crisis that gripped the nation to the memorable and history-making stories and interviews.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David York.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us on this Monday night. I'm Wade Johnson in for David. We begin tonight with a stunning breach in national security involving the ongoing, highly classified U.S. attacks targeting Houthi rebels in Yemen. The details reportedly discussed openly over a group chat on the unauthorized Signal app among members of President Trump's national security team. A journalist mistakenly invited to the group. The U.S. bombing campaign against the Houthis now in its 10th day. The Trump administration targeting the Iranian-backed rebels who have long been threatening Israel and cargo ships in the area. The Atlantic now revealing its editor-in-chief, who was invited to join the group chat, says he was included on all the sensitive information hours before the military strikes began. Vice President J.D. Vance, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, top cabinet officials and national security leaders all texting about the plan. President Trump pressed about the report following today's cabinet meeting, saying he didn't know anything about it. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, lawmakers on both sides demanding answers. ABC's Chief Global Affairs Correspondent Martha Raddatz leads us off.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News.
Good evening, I'm John Dickerson. I'm Maurice Dubois. We begin tonight with a question. How on earth did this happen?
This is an extraordinary, potentially dangerous, and without a doubt embarrassing breach of national security.
A journalist was inadvertently included on a text message chain in which the president's national security team was planning an attack on Yemen's Houthi rebels.
Then, on the day of the attack, with the journalist still included in the text message chain, the Secretary of Defense spelled out exactly how it would play out 2 hours before it did.
This all happened on an encrypted text messaging service called Signal, which is not approved for sharing classified information.
Ed O'Keefe is at the White House with more about the security breach and the president's reaction tonight. Ed?
Good evening. The senior officials on the group text debated whether or not the U.S. should strike Houthi targets and swap details of the airstrikes. The details, so sensitive. The reporter who accidentally received it all opted not to publish them out of concern for national security. The U.S. bombed Houthi rebel positions in Yemen on March 15th in response to the group's continued attacks on commercial shipping vessels in the Red Sea and missile strikes against Israel. Classified details of the U.S. attack plans were first shared 2 days earlier with Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine. He'd been added, accidentally, to a group chat of senior administration officials on Signal, invited by National Security Advisor Michael Waltz.
I never heard of anything quite like this.
In all, 18 people were in the chat, including Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard.
People have devices that are extraordinarily convenient, and government officials are just like you and me. They like convenience. They're just like you and me. They sometimes send text to people they didn't mean to send text to. The consequences here are a lot higher for that sort of thing than in regular civilian life.
Goldberg watched on his phone as the group debated striking the Houthis. And then, on the morning of the attacks, Hegseth shared operational details about the forthcoming strike, including the timing, the targets, and the types of weapons used. Once the strikes concluded, the group exchanged emojis in celebration, flames, fist bumps, and American flags. Sharing top-secret details over Signal likely violated the Espionage Act, according to CBS News national security consultant Sam Vinograd.
Operational plans related to the Houthis and strikes in Yemen more than likely are classified or at least operationally sensitive. So it'll be important to see whether the Department of Justice opens up an investigation into a potential leak of classified information.
Goldberg's article.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz. On the NewsHour tonight, the balance of power comes into stark focus as President Trump calls for a federal judge to be disbarred and the Supreme Court hears a critical redistricting case.
Top Trump officials appear to accidentally share Yemen war plans via a commercial messaging app with Atlantic editor and Washington Week moderator Jeffrey Goldberg, who joins us with details.
And farmers across the country feel the impact of federal funding cuts.
It's heartbreaking to tell a farmer who is counting on it. And the season doesn't wait and the climate doesn't wait.
Welcome to the NewsHour. In a U.S. appeals court today, the Trump administration challenged a federal judge's decision to stop the deportations of alleged gang members using a rare wartime authority.
The three-judge panel has yet to rule, but there was one apparent point of consensus among two of the judges, agreeing the judiciary does have the authority to review President Trump's actions. It's the latest chapter in the ongoing showdown between President Trump and the judiciary. Our White House correspondent Laura Barone-Lopez joins us now with the latest. So, Laura, this was a nearly 2-hour-long hearing in this D.C. appeals court on the Trump administration's use of this centuries-old Alien Enemies Act. What stood out to you?
So this three-judge panel includes judges appointed by President George W. Bush, Barack Obama, as well as Donald Trump. And there was one big point of agreement among two of the judges that spoke the most during the arguments. I'm talking about Judge Justin Walker, who is an appointee of President Trump, and an Obama appointee, Patricia Millett. And they were both skeptical of the Trump administration's arguments that essentially the president's actions are beyond judicial review. So they both said they believe that the judiciary can review this. Now, Judge Justin Walker focused his questions on whether or not D.C. was the right venue, saying maybe this lawsuit should be brought somewhere else. Now, Judge Patricia.
Hello and a very warm welcome. If you're just joining us, you're watching Daybreak. These are the top stories. The White House texts war plans to bomb Yemen to a group chat that included the U.S. Secretary of State, the head of the CIA, and a journalist for The Atlantic. A review now underway as to how the editor of that magazine was added to the group chat. He says he got an invite from National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Over 1,000 people arrested in Turkey for protesting. They were part of the massive demonstrations that have been ongoing for over 6 days there. People outraged over the arrest of the mayor of Istanbul, a key rival to President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. An Israel has killed at least 730 Palestinians in the past week in Gaza. That is since Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the return of intensive airstrikes and ground operations there. Meanwhile, across in the West Bank, armed Israeli settlers beat up a Palestinian filmmaker who was then arrested by the military. Inadvertently including a journalist in a classified group chat about bombing Yemen, the White House confirms that The Atlantic magazine's editor was aware of US plans to strike hours ahead of any official announcement. The National Security Council in the US is now under review. The group chat included former Fox News host and now Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Vice President J.D. Vance and other top officials. Elitza Gadava tells us more.
Mr. President, your reaction to the story in The Atlantic?
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business.
The story in question is called "The Trump Administration Accidentally Texted Me Its War Plans," and it disclosed a shocking intelligence breach by top U.S. officials. On the 11th of March, Jeffrey Goldberg, The Atlantic's editor-in-chief, received an unexpected connection request on the commercial app Signal by a user identifying as Michael Waltz, presumably Donald Trump's national security advisor. 2 days later, Goldberg was added to a group chat where top Trump administration officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance, CIA boss John Ratcliffe, and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, were actively discussing action against the Houthi rebels in Yemen.
I could not believe that the national security advisor to the president would be so reckless to include the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic in such discussions.
He thought he might be part of a disinformation campaign, but the tone of the messages was quite authentic.
If you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing Europe out again.
I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic.
The text chain contained detailed information on the targets, weapons used, and the attack sequencing. On the 15th of March, Yemen's health ministry reported that more than 50 people were killed in the strikes. The U.S. Secretary of Defense denied that any information was mistakenly disclosed.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that. That's it.
The National Security Council, however, said the text chain appears to be authentic. The security breach provoked outrage among Democrats.
President, this is one of the most stunning breaches of military intelligence I have read about in a very, very long time.
You have to be kidding me, wrote Hillary Clinton on X. The Democrat was relentlessly attacked by Donald Trump during the 2016 presidential campaign for using her private email to send official communication when she was a Secretary of State.
With the temperament of Donald
Good morning. State pension fury as rumours grow the triple lock could be axed.
As the government's attention now turns to housing, a £2 billion investment that we're going.
All of that to go with just 1 day until the spring statement.
Trump's top team takes a swipe at Europe, dubbing them freeloaders in a leaked WhatsApp message.
Some breaking news in the past few minutes. The Home Office announces it's no longer working with the main provider of migrant hotels.
The Conservatives renew their campaign for a national inquiry into rape gangs.
More money is set to be ploughed into protecting Britain's farms as rural crime rates rise.
Dipping your toe into the dating pool after 50 years of age. How tricky is it in this digital age? We're asking, is it ever too late to find love?
What went wrong for Blue Peter? The BBC access live episodes as the programme moves online after 66 years. One of the show's former presenters, Tim Vincent, will be joining us later on in the programme.
What
would Shep and Petra say? In sport today, moans abound about England's performance against Latvia last night, which, yes, was a little bit dull, but they did win 3-0. As Wales turn in the World Cup qualifiers tonight, they're in North Macedonia, hoping to continue Craig Bellamy's very good unbeaten run as manager. And Emma Raducanu wins again, finds herself in the quarterfinals of the Miami Open.
Whilst it is going to turn quite cloudy with a bit of rain for quite a few of us through today, there's more spring sunshine on offer as we go through tomorrow. I'll have the details coming up.
And also coming up to 7:02, a very good morning to you on this Tuesday morning. I'm Eamon Holmes.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is GB News Breakfast.
Okay, the breaking news we can bring you in.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on today's show. Calls for heads to roll at the White House after top secret war plans are accidentally leaked on a group chat.
Plus, a warning from the Bank of England that Donald Trump's tariffs and an ageing population could derail the Chancellor's spending plan.
And victory for England at Wembley. We'll talk about what we learned from Thomas Tuchel's first 2 games in charge.
Miles Lewis Skelly is the future. That's the conclusion. It's Tuesday, the 25th of March. Your headlines. It's Amzar at the White House, say Democrats after plans to bomb Yemen are accidentally shared with a journalist on a group chat.
Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that.
Ticket users driving more women to take their own lives. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, promises £2 billion for affordable housing ahead of tomorrow's spring statement. We'll speak to the government in the next few minutes. And just what was the spinning white spiral spotted in the skies above Britain? Good morning to you. There's been an extraordinary security breach at the White House. Good morning to you. There's been an extraordinary security breach at the White House. We'll be talking about that in just a moment. But first, Mari, massive 48 hours ahead for the government. We're going to be diving into that throughout the show.
We absolutely are. Not long to wait now until the spring statement, but then nonetheless, the Governor of the Bank of England coming out as a bit of a painful moment for the government, damaging their growth plans, saying, actually, we've got bigger problems, tariffs and an ageing population.
We're going to dive into that with Mari, those comments from the Bank of England Governor, and we'll be talking to the government. Matthew Penning, who you might have seen, just walk past Mari, and he'll be joining us in about 10 minutes' time. Meanwhile, the White House has been left scrambling to explain how a journalist was included in a group chat about its plans to bomb Houthi rebels in Yemen. Democrats called it amateur hour, and there are calls for the president's national security advisor, Mike Waltz, to be fired. Sky correspondent David Blevins has this report.
This was supposed to be a top-secret mission, but news of US strikes on Houthi rebels in Yemen were accidentally leaked to a journalist who'd been added to a group chat on a secure messaging app.
I assumed that I was being spoofed or hoaxed or being included in some kind of disinformation campaign, because it was simply too improbable to me that they would have such poor operational security as to inadvertently invite the editor of The Atlantic into a national security discussion about the timing of a bombing campaign.
In that group chat were Vice President J.D. Vance, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. They complained about bailing out Europe, debated the timing of the strikes, and posted emojis when they were done. The President's National Security Committee confirmed the veracity of the group, but that didn't stop the Defense Secretary attempting to discredit the journalist.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that.
Home of the election.
Today, cost of living relief and Medicare in focus as the government prepares to hand down its fourth budget.
The Australian economy is turning a corner, and this is about building on that momentum.
Also 2 journalists among dozens killed in Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. Aid workers are calling for increased protection. White House officials accidentally include a US journalist in a national security group chat. And key venues and locations of the 2032 Brisbane Olympic and Paralympic Games about to be unveiled. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ros Childs. Treasurer Jim Chalmers is preparing to hand down Labour's fourth budget, saying the government has cost of living pressures front of mind. Treasurer says it will also reflect the rise in global uncertainty, warning Australia has a lot to lose from escalating international trade tensions. Political reporter Pablo Vinales has more from Parliament House in Canberra. Good afternoon, Pablo. So what's the government said we can expect from tonight's budget?
Ross, good afternoon. Well, Labor's pre-budget sell sounding more and more like an election pitch. We've heard Jim Chalmers this morning repeating the government's campaign slogan, building Australia's future. We know that after back-to-back surpluses, the budget will be returning to deficit for years to come. But Jim Chalmers is framing this in 3 words: repair, relief and reform. He joined the Prime Minister and Finance Minister this morning as the government prepares to sell this budget. And let's have a listen to what the Prime Minister had to say.
It's been a great task trying to land a 747 on a helicopter pad here, trying to get that inflation level down whilst making sure we maintain employment, increase wages and defend people's living standards by providing cost of living relief.
So the Prime Minister there speaking about the challenge the government has in addressing inflation and those cost of living pressures. It also comes against the backdrop of an uncertain global economy. The Treasurer Jim Chalmers speaking about concerns of an escalating trade war, namely through Donald Trump's America First agenda and another round of tariffs potentially on Australian imports on top of aluminium and steel. The concern among some industries here in Australia, in the beef sector and in the pharmaceutical industries. The bigger concern that Jim Chalmers is speaking about, though, is the flow-on effects of a wider trade war, saying that the best defence against that is a resilient economy.
So the budget's Hidden Histories, premiering 6 April, Sunday on CMA. This is Asia Now.
Hello, it's 3 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 12:30 in New Delhi, 2 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Angela Lin at this hour. South Korean acting President Han Duck-soo says he will do his best to weather a tariff storm triggered by the U.S. The statement comes a day after the Constitutional Court reinstated him. Japan and South Korea continue to grapple with wildfires, with strong winds hampering efforts to bring the flames under control. And Trump officials under fire over the mishandling of classified information. The White House admits plans to attack Yemen were mistakenly shared with a journalist in a group chat. South Korea's acting president, Han Duck-soo, has called on the government to ensure that national security and people's livelihoods are secured as the country braces for potential impact in light of U.S. tariffs which come into force next month.
지금 이 순간 우리의 소명은 국민의 안전을 지키고 통상 전쟁으로부터 국익을 확보하며 국회와의 협치를 통해 당면한 국가적 현안에 대한 해법을 조속히 마련하는 것입니다.
Mr. Han says he will do his best to weather what he calls the US-led tariff storm by tapping into his past experiences in trade and foreign policy. He also vowed to work alongside ruling and opposition parties to lead relief efforts for citizens who could be affected by the trade war. South Korea has been seeking exemption from reciprocal tariffs that are set to take effect in April. This follows threats by the US president, who singled out the country for applying high tariffs on American exports earlier this month. Mr. Trump has said that the Asian nation's tariffs were 4 times higher than those of the US.
Heightened fears over a trade war come a day after Mr. Han was reinstated as acting president, following the Constitutional Court's decision to strike down his impeachment. Japan and South Korea are grappling with multiple wildfires that have ripped through hectares of land, with officials warning that high winds and rising temperatures are hindering efforts to put out the blazes. South Korean authorities say wildfires in the country's southeast have worsened overnight and are expected to intensify amid dry and windy weather. The defense minister
Africa News. The news. Angola has called it quits on the ongoing mediations pitting the M23 rebels, Congo and Rwanda after a series of failed negotiation efforts coupled with external interference. The announcement was made by the presidency of the Republic of Angola on Monday, March 24. After nearly 2 months as the African Union's chair, Angola acknowledged the need to step back from the mediating the DRC-Rwanda conflict to focus on broader continental priorities, including peace, infrastructure, economic development, and justice for Africans. Angola's mediation efforts have seen its ups and downs, with the M23 rebels last week rejecting mediations, citing sanctions by the international community. The negotiations were later overshadowed by an abrupt meeting between Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi and Rwandan counterpart Paul Kagame in Doha, Qatar. The conflict has escalated recently, with the M23 rebels capturing key towns in North and South Kivu provinces, displacing thousands and worsening the humanitarian crisis. Despite diplomatic efforts, violence between the DRC and M23 continues, highlighting the urgent need for dialogue.
The United States has intensified its strikes against Yemen's Houthi rebels, claiming the elimination of key figures, including their top missile commander. National Security Advisor stated that American forces have targeted Houthi leadership, communication centers, weapon factories, and drone production facilities. The airstrikes, now in their 10th consecutive day, follow Houthi attacks on commercial shipping and threats to resume targeting vessels in the Red Sea. Since November 2023, the Houthis have launched over 100 strikes on merchant ships, resulting in the sinking of 2 vessels and the death of 4 sailors. One recent strike reportedly hit a building in the western district of capital Sana'a, killing at least 1 person and injuring 13 others. The US maintains that these operations aim to deter Houthi aggression and send a clear message to Iran, the group's main supporter. President Donald Trump has declared that Iran will be held accountable for any attacks by the Houthi group in Yemen.
The US and Russian negotiators met on Monday in Saudi Arabia for discussions on a partial ceasefire in Ukraine, following a round of talks between US and Ukrainian delegations earlier in the day, according to Russian state media. The negotiations took place at Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. Following this meeting, further discussions between US and Ukrainian teams are anticipated. The talks are focused on establishing a pause in long-range attacks by both Russia and Ukraine on energy facilities and civilian infrastructures. Additionally, the discussions aim to halt attacks in the Black Sea to ensure the safe passage of commercial ships. Earlier in the week, Ukraine and Russia tentatively agreed to a limited ceasefire.
On this day, 1 year ago, after months of tension and uncertainty, Bassirou Diomaye Faye won Senegal's presidential election. Faye's victory over established political figures was historic and raised the hopes of many in the country. His record so far is contested. So far, so good. We're confident it's going to work. But they have to accept criticism, because criticism has a positive side in that it allows you to improve. We haven't seen any of the promises from the government. They had asked us to fight by promising young people projects and assuring us that there would be work, but we haven't seen anything yet. Says his election, Faye has made interventions to reduce food inflation, conducted an audit of the previous government, and launched a plan to revitalize agriculture. But the opposition says it is not enough. This is indeed a disappointment. Insofar as the referential document is concerned, there are no projects developed that actually emanate from the referential called Senegal Vision 2050 to find mechanisms to revive our economy. The government, headed by Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, has launched a major campaign to clean up the administration, reduce waste, and optimize public resources. This analyst says the actions point to a good start. I consider the record to be generally positive. When you look at 2 laws, justice, which was a bit of a weak point, and which was much criticized. He organized a conference on justice. Today, the relationship that some Senegalese have with public money is frankly not a very good one. People are embezzling all over the place, and it's a good thing they're doing it. Let the financial judiciary sanction it. Whatever the outcome of Bassirou Diomaye Faye's first year in power, the Senegalese still expect more from his government, especially on the social and economic front.
Thank you very much for giving time to Amir Shekel 5858. I am Amir Shekel. Have a good life. Bye-bye.